Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to whoever you are from wherever and whenever you are listening. You're joining us for another episode of ARCHAT. I'm Nathan Herrman, as always, joined by Crystal Golightly, and Steven Dickens is here too. And we are joined today by Dina Milazzo, who I have been reliably informed was a part of the early iterations of Cisco's analyst relations program. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today. Dina, to kick things off, I would love it if you told us what you're up to today. Give us a little bit of your background and, your story, and let's go from there.
Sure. Well, I founded Advance AR, which is a consulting firm, and I use that for the last couple of years. I've been helping companies um, with their AR strategies, working on some marketing projects before, and custom research projects. I've been in the business in high tech for over 25 years, closer to 30.
Proves you can start this job in kindergarten, doesn't it, Dina?
Exactly.
It does.
Exactly.
It does.
Absolutely.
You can start for our younger listeners. You can start and get into this job age 5 and 6, and build a career and go all the
Yes.
way through.
Some
Absolutely.
people say that's when executive presence begins.
I think
Sure.
so.
Wait, it absolutely does at that age, because if anyone knows very young children.
Well,
Anyways, moving on.
your son's got a podcasting blooper reel already, Crystal.
That's hilarious. So before I actually started in analyst relations, I was an analyst with a company called G2 Research, which was actually acquired by Gartner Group. It's not the same G2 as it is now, but there are G2ers still at Gartner. But I ended up transitioning to working for Cisco on in their analyst relations in a analyst relations capacity, and gone from there. Most recently consulting, but I've moved into um, field operations, marketing, field marketing, business development. I do custom research projects. So
I'm going to
What
steal
has
Crystal's
been
question. I'm going to steal Crystal's question. I'm going to lean in. I'm going to be spicy today. So
Can I
take
go
it.
somewhere else first, Stephen, before we go there? Just before we dig
Oh,
into
okay.
AR?
Cut
I
across me,
just
my friend.
I
Go
just
for it.
wanted to ask, of all those roles, what's been your most favorite? And you don't just have to say AR because you're on an AR podcast.
no, I come back to wanting to advance AR and make it what I felt it was really back in the early days. It's a very cross-functional, very highly strategic function. And I think through the years, if it's I've seen the function, it has like an identity crisis. And I look at my counterparts in IR and I say, hey, there's regulation here. There's no identity issue. There's no
Hmm.
what is my remit? Who am I accountable to? But AR seems to get lost between and a lot of this is politics inside the organization. And I think it's just a really interesting dynamic with this function is why is there such an identity crisis? And why do we have training from different experts that are so different and diverse and that don't really, in my opinion, focus on some of the core needs and expertise that this function could bring to organizations.
Yes.
So
It's it,
you have IR reporting to a CFO usually. Well, where we don't even know where AR should report.
it's
Depends
been
on
a
the
thread
organization.
throughout the conversations over the last year that we've seen it go into CMOs directly. We've seen it go into product management. Seen it go into comms. The conversation we had with Becca was fascinating about where
Yeah.
it should sit. It's a consistent thread, Dina, and I think you're right. The politics, I think, comes from the reporting line. So where it sits kind of defines its mission a little bit.
It's also who you bring in, and what the goal and the remit of AR is within the organization. So, if an organization, it just depends on its um, the ultimate goal, what makes AR successful. I think it was someone had said on this podcast, what does the business think is critical right now, and where do you think AR plays a role in this success? And does the executive team view it as an essential strategic role, or is it a supporting role?
Mhm.
My view is that it needs to get back to an essential strategic goal with some regulations and rules around it for both the analyst side and the functions health. So that
But I've got
that's
a
my 2
name
cents.
drop, Nathan, so I'm going to cut in front of you. Just a
Of
proof
course.
point from this week. Gabby Berkman, who I know a bunch of us know, who's just fantastic, doing great work at Dynatrace. Yeah, hey, Gabby. I think the proof is in the pudding there. She pulled together all of her executive leadership team this week for a dinner with a small group of us analysts. And this was at AWS reInvent, arguably the biggest tech conference of the year. We had the CEO, we had the CMO, we had the CTO. It was literally all of the execs. And dinner lasted probably 3 hours. So just to unpack that, to get your CEO and leadership team to take one of their dinner opportunities out to spend time with analysts at arguably the biggest and most packed show. Kudos to Gabby, because what that means is that her leadership team values her role enough to invest and commit the time. And I think it speaks to what you're trying to say, Dina. The CEO was really heavily engaged, super thankful that he'd spent time with analysts, and obviously sees the value. And that comes just from the work that Gabby's been doing over there, and
Stephen,
Brenda as well.
Stephen, I want to ask you a question, and then I
Okay.
want to pull it back. And Dina, I have uh, a different question for you if I remember it, because I've currently forgot it. And then I want to talk more about this idea of an industry that needs regulation and definition, because I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by that. Stephen,
Go for it.
maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, and I'm not necessarily saying this is what I believe, but we have an analyst here. I want to ask an analyst a pointed question. I know that it's important to get face time with CEOs, with C-suite leaders, but is that more important than getting face time with the people within the business that actually make the decisions on product lines, on go-to-market strategy? What I'm trying to say is, I know that everyone loves a selfie and a photo and saying, you've rubbed
I
elbows with
forgot
this
my
person.
selfie with the
I
CEO of
know, I know.
Dynatrace. I know, I failed.
And it is absolutely the gold standard when an AR program can provide that. But is that actually always the most effective engagement for you as an analyst who's thinking about advising the market?
I think it's a capstone to having, Alois over at, and I'm butchering his name, always meets with me.
Another name drop.
I know.
We're going to start a counter.
I know. We do this on this podcast, Dina, so don't worry. I meet with him regularly from Dynatrace, and I'm picking on Dynatrace as just the example that's on the top of my head. This happens with a lot of them. You have different conversations with CEOs and the executive leadership team, and they give you different perspectives, and they give you just raw signal that you don't get from other places. And it depends what type of analyst you are. If you're a Gartner analyst and you have one very tight product focus area, you probably don't need to chat to the CEO. You need to go and chat to the product leader who looks after your domain and just get super deep. If you're an analyst a bit more like me and a bunch of others that's a bit more sort of a T-shaped in their coverage, so they've got a lot of horizontal coverage and then they've got some depth in one or two areas, you do need to get that. So I track observability pretty closely, but for me, it's super useful to speak to those chief product officers, CTOs for the platform and the leadership team. I've also got to do the staff work and my own research to understand the product in some depth. And I had a conversation the following morning with one of their field CTOs to go super deep, and we were, nerding out on industry standards and where the market's going. So that was as useful a session, but you never get a better view from where a company's going than from chatting to its CEO and having dinner, and not a formal sort of briefing down a screen. You get the fine-grained feedback.
I
So
mean, you
Steven,
might say it's not a formal briefing, but I want you to know that the AR practitioner on the other side
Gabby
had
did
to put together an extensive briefing doc.
Gabby did all the work. Gabby did
Right.
all the
Yeah.
work. That doesn't happen without all the
Yeah.
work. The seating plan of who, she said she did it
Yeah.
5 times to work
Yeah.
out who sat next to who
Yeah.
and how it, I
Crystal,
mean, so
yeah.
all the work went in.
So Dina, what's your take on this? Because you've been on both sides, right?
and
On
I
the
and as an analyst, yes, w- w- it's valuable to sit with a CEO. From an analyst relations perspective, it's important to get a certain amount of hours or commit from every exec. How many hours are you willing to give to this program? Here's what we're trying to achieve. And um, if a CEO is willing to give a couple hours for a dinner, that's great. And it is all part of the CEO's remit to, you know, work with press, work with financial analysts, work with industry analysts, any influencer that will raise the awareness and the strength of the company. So yes, but from a strategic perspective, as an analyst relations perspective professional, and this gets back to the original question you had for me, Crystal, going into this is how can analyst relations really help achieve the goals of the company, whether it's in improve sales closure times, rate of closure, um, with extended deal times, and you really want to try to is it shorten sales cycle? Is it we're looking at growth in terms of acquisition and new companies to fill gaps. Well, how can analyst relations help with that? Is it working with more of the, um, I don't know, Gartner cool vendors and talking to those
Mm-hmm.
analysts about what they've actually looked at in the market and who's viable? Um, so again, it goes back to how strategic is the company engaging those analysts to help them with their business. And if a dinner makes the analysts feel good, that's great. If it helps your research, that's one part of it. But it actually doesn't impact the business as I think as much as analyst relations needs to impact the
You're
business.
you're
Every company I've been at, the CEO has been willing to spend a few hours with analysts in a public setting, and but that doesn't mean that they actually value your opinion. It
yes.
doesn't mean that they actually think you bring value or impact their business. And that's what I think analyst relations has to be very careful about. And I was at New Relic, so I know Dinah Trace well, and it's a great company. She does a great job. Um, and I have a huge regard for all of the analyst relations folks because I know what they deal with. They're
Mhm.
dealing with internal politics. They're dealing with whatever technology area they're focused on. They have to understand that particular set of analysts, and it changes. There are some technology analysts that are very good in certain spaces, and then there are others that are, I'm sorry, but they're just not very good analysts. And you still have to try to work with your company to convince them that these analysts and this function is worth it and brings
Oh,
value.
Dean, I'm gonna have to jump in. How do you define a good analyst?
Well,
I've got my rubric for what I use, but I'd love to hear yours.
before you answer that, I was going to just pull something out. You're highlighting the inbound and outbound nature of analyst relations.
Mhm.
And obviously, you're saying that the inbound nature is sometimes the most important because that's what affects the success of a business. But I think to maybe extrapolate, the outbound side of the job sometimes it takes up a large part of the mind share and the market share of your day-to-day activities, and increasingly does so with the advent of different kinds of voices that are in the analyst ecosystem that don't necessarily focus as much on that inbound aspect. but are a great tool for the outbound aspect, the briefings, the message amplification, etc. Am I putting words in your mouth? Is that fair? Does that kind of tee Steven up to then ask his question again?
I would argue that the more inbound the analysts don't want to be pitched to all the time. They don't want to be briefed constantly to be sold, especially in these incredibly crowded markets.
Yeah.
Their remit is to add value to the organization. If that's message testing, if a company has no clear brand or messaging, and that is the value an analyst can bring to the company, great. Let's message test all day long. Let's get that validation. I've worked for many companies who have no interest in that being the remit for analyst relations to message test. That's
Yeah.
not going to
It takes a
impact.
level of maturity and
Right.
yeah.
An analogy, I'll road test it here with you, Dina. We'll go back to the how do you define a good analyst. The analogy I've been using, and I've used it probably 10 times this week, is you want a floor laid.
You want to what?
You want a flooring laid. Most
Okay.
analyst relations teams and vendor teams turn up and go, look at my nice polished wood floor. And the only feedback I can give them is, you might want to put a rug down. What they should be doing is engaging analysts early in the process. Should I lay tile? Should I lay carpet? Should I put wood flooring down? Should I do polished cement? When I'm doing the cement, what's the mixture? If you involve us really early in the process, we can add value and make the flooring the best possible flooring.
You can take that analogy even further. You should be consulting an analyst when you draw the blueprints for the house. Like if you're truly maximizing the channel, you are engaging with them even as an early stage company. Like you might not have full-time AR, you might be engaging with somebody like Dina or some of the other folks we've talked to. Like, I have an idea. Here is my idea. Let me pitch you my idea. I have an early proof of concept. We're Series A, B company. Help us build the blueprint before we ever think about the flooring.
Yeah. But I think so many of the teams, and the biggest one I've heard, we get customer feedback, and that really tweaks me because nobody was telling Nokia in 2006 to make it. No customer was telling the Nokia product management team, go make a touchscreen smartphone with no keyboard. Everybody was tweaking the keyboard. We were doing better and different flip phones. You go back way before that when the Ford Model T, nobody told Henry Ford it was get me a faster horse or more places where I can switch horses. So I kind of, yes, you should listen to customers. Yes, you absolutely should. But customers are this close and they want feature requests. They're not going to give you big strategic pivots.
Steven, what's your perspective on vendors who have to balance what the customers are asking for and what the analysts are telling them? Because those are sometimes very drastically different things.
I mean,
Hold on. I think Dina had something to share with what Steven said.
It's so interesting because I think it just depends on the company, because companies that are innovating and really breaking the mold and creating really truly new markets, they're not asking analysts, how should I innovate this? What is it? They're asking analysts to validate what they're doing potentially, but they're market focused. The analysts need to come along, and that's in the early days. If you look at when IDC was founded in the early 60s, way before Gartner, when you look at when Forrester was founded, it started to transition to this technology because technology was taking off. And I think that to look for analysts to amplify your innovations, and if you're moving into new markets, if like for example Cisco, they were a clear leader in pretty much every. I managed, I think, 9 Magic Quadrants at the time, plus MarketScapes, plus all of these things. They were the leader. They were educating. You couldn't educate enough. The analysts wanted to spend time. They were some of my best friends still. They're all retired now, but you work with these analysts to make the market smarter, to make the buying decisions, and the people who are trying to make complex business decisions within their complex corporate environments run better, get online, make it smooth. So there's that. But Cisco was not asking the analysts or looking to the analysts for innovation. And there's that technology kind of arrogance, I think, where we're the innovators, the analysts, we're bringing them along. And then there are really crowded markets. So this is where it becomes very market dependent, where the analysts are talking to all the competitors, and they do know they have a broader view of the market, and they can sit back and they can say, well, I can tell you right now, I know this messaging or this positioning or this feature is not going to get you to where you want to go. And I think that is very incredibly valuable. But Steven, you may be one of those analysts that can do that. There aren't a lot of analysts that are, we've had analysts that have been pulled into technology areas that from other technology areas that really couldn't do that for the organization. So again, it's what is the business looking for? What is the quality of the analysts that you're working with? How experienced are they in that space? And truly, like, what's your remit as an analyst relations person?
You're highlighting what I think is maybe one of the hardest parts of being an AR leader in an organization,
Absolutely.
which is helping internal stakeholders understand that analysts are not created equal, and that certain analysts are good for certain things and others are good for
Absolutely.
other things. Like I'm sure everyone's had a conversation where, someone keeps asking, is so and so influential? And you're like, well,
Maybe.
not in the way you think of Gartner, but like they're really good for this. And then it's that circular argument where, but are they influential? And I think that's something that analysts and AR people could all help evangelize better. Market wide is that not every analyst is an end user analyst, and not every analyst has to be an end user analyst.
So this gets back to the original question. How have I used analysts and analyst relations in other roles across the organization? How can you elevate your position regardless of what the company is trying to achieve? So in my role as field marketing for mobile data, this is early on, an enterprise company moving into mobile data, mobile wireless, building out our capabilities on our cell phones, right? GPRS networks, GSM. So um, we really had to go out to the field in Europe and educate the field on what telecom providers, mobile, wireless, what their issues were, what their careabouts were. And so we went out with Motorola, with a partner, and brought in analysts from GSMA Intelligence. I don't know if they exist anymore.
They still do.
Do they? And
Yeah.
and the European telecommunications, they had an analyst arm. So you brought them in, and they actually helped educate the field on how to sell. Now, those are like high impact efforts where you're going on a global tour to really educate the field and make them more competent. And it's the same thing with Juniper when moving
Mm-hmm.
from service provider, where they had a huge, reputation, great core routing, and moving into the enterprise and launching this amazing product, the MX that was going to change the enterprise. It has intelligence, and it's going to collapse all those Cisco layers. And you're going to, did we use
Yeah.
financial analysis, an analyst to draw up how many layers are you going to, how many Cisco routers are you going to get rid of? And how much money are you going to save? And did the field use that and sell it into enterprises? Absolutely. So there are times where you pull in those analysts, and it can have a huge impact on the strength and the posture of a company. Um,
I
so I
gotta
think
punctuate you, Dina, because you just did like the ultimate mic drop, right? I just would like to just take a breath right there because you were able to take us back into a world that we've all lived with the rise of our mobile phones and all of these different factors and we enjoy this foundational work that you were a part of and you broke it down into these very specific pieces where I think everyone can also relate to those
Yes.
challenges.
And to
Wow.
to to double punctuate that, because I was going to do the same. You talked earlier about managing 9 magic quadrants and then, countless marketscapes and waves and other evaluative reports. Based on what you just talked about and kind of my own feelings, and maybe we'll edit this out if I sound terrible, because Crystal, I don't want you to hurt my career. I think sometimes the evaluative reports are the least important part of the job, because what you just described is some of the most impactful.
Keep it
And I
in.
know that
Don't edit it out. It's
I know that
important.
they're a part of the job, but sometimes I feel my most accomplished as an AR leader when it's the stuff outside of the RFIs and the questionnaires, and it's the connecting with field marketing, connecting with partner marketing, jumping on a call with a potential customer, like those moments where I'm using the analyst channel to actually affect like success on a given day of the week and not just in the long tail concept of a report.
so. My feeling about that is there are those things about every job that you
Yeah.
just love to do that fill your cup up that you just feel energized about. And
Yeah.
those engagements are where you feel energized. The things that are draining and that are high stress, where you feel like sometimes you have control, sometimes you don't. So, and those quadrants are one of them. Unfortunately, it's one of the most downloaded research reports in the world, and you have to. I think there is. Didn't one of you say? I think they should have one huge RFI that you just fill out for all of the different quadrants. I don't know. Somebody said that somewhere.
Well, I
You
mean, I
do it
think
once and then they take from that data, and
it's
then maybe you
interesting. I
do a
think we're
briefing
gonna.
here
I
and
mean,
there.
talking about the drudgery and the sort of, I call it vendor torture that those MQ sort of RFIs are. I think and we had Sonia on the show a few months back. What they're doing with ARIA at Databricks, what others are looking to do. I think that is one area that is going to transform the role of AR through AI. If we can just get the drudge of filling in a 500 question RFI down and through our AI and enable super smart people like you, Nathan, and Dina to go do the real job, which is not filling in a massive spreadsheet, that's going to be real progress,
I
because
think
then
it'll
we get
help.
you on the strategic stuff rather than the filling in
I think
questionnaire.
it'll I think it'll help, but we talked about this a lot at AR Engage recently. I do have a fear that if we use AI to do that, eventually we're all just saying the same thing because of AI. And then what value do reports have? We could get into a really like long tail kind of spiral here. So we're not going to do that. Instead, the question I wanted to come back to, Dina, was you talked about an identity crisis. You talked about nobody ever questions what influencer or investor relations job is. Like they work on the quarterly calls, they work with the Wall Street investors, answering questions, you name it. I would agree AR has an identity crisis, but I also struggled to find the answer because we've highlighted that it's such a wide ranging remit. It's not as neatly defined as what investor relations does. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because you brought it up earlier as a challenge that we need to overcome.
Well, I think it has to be defined organization by organization, and that doesn't help um, as a as let's say a training tool, but maybe it does. I mean, maybe if you actually really break down AR training by, if you're in a startup innovator breaking new ground in how the world works or innovation, versus if you're a Google or an AWS and a large highly matrixed organization where there are so many analyst relations representatives operating in a certain type of cadence with certain expectations, well defined, very much systematic. I think you have to train based on what type of organization you're in and set the expectation and ask the questions, what do you need from AR in the next 90 days to make it
Yeah.
successful from an executive perspective? And what are the executives going to do to help enable that? Because AR doesn't do it on its own. So highly reliant on partnerships, honesty, communication, um, and so I think that's where and IR has to do that too. They just have more stringent regulatory processes but why not make AR a little bit more like that? I mean, for going back to Magic Quadrants and filling out those are massive go-to-market RFI, analysis. I mean, why not make those part of your planning process? Fill it out during that period of time where you're actually setting the strategy, because you know what? They go into every aspect of the business. And so um that's what we always tried to
It
do, or
sounds
what I
like you've got a framework in the works here of
well, I do.
our planning and how to be successful and prepared and get to the business impacts.
Well, I've talked to a lot of analyst relations professional, and I've had young professionals on my team that I really try to empower to think about, what do you want this job to be for you? Do you want to just set up meetings, or do you want to be a strategic partner across the organization and really be thought of as um, someone who can be part of the conversations with customers, with leadership, in terms of, hey, I know the right analysts who can come in and at least give us a great perspective on, we want to change our model to open source, or we want to invest in that. Well, hey, Stephen O'Grady, James, James Governor, Rachel, these people have sat down with executives I've had in the past where they're completely so valuable in talking about the business model of open source. And
Yeah.
and you need to be thinking and knowing the industry well enough to bring these people in to discuss at the appropriate level with the appropriate people at the appropriate time, um, these aspects of the business. And I think it's not an easy job, and it takes a lot of confidence working across the companies. It's also takes a very, very thick skin, because you have to work with a lot of people and you have to pick the right spokespeople. You have to pick
Yeah.
the people who are best, not the smartest, but who can communicate. And people get mad at you. It is but it happens. Um, it, it happens because you want to do the best for the company. You want
And
to.
yeah, sorry, not to interrupt. I was just gonna say, and I think the important thing there too is the company has to want it too. Like,
Exactly. And believe in
analyst
it.
relations is not a function to have if you're not willing to be challenged, I think, like, all of the time.
I don't think you can uh, uh, just be. I think there are a lot of people who say you just need to get along and you just need to be kind and you need to be kind of a service organization. And yes, you do need to be all those things. That's part of life. You need to get along with people.
Yeah.
Um, but you have to work with an eclectic group of people, especially on the analyst side, because these people, and I'm one of them, I know they work differently. They have an independence, they have an opinion, they have their own analysis. They are not swayed easily. Most analysts are strong personalities, and I've
Yeah.
been through some woozies, you like, and then internally, when you're working with the politics of a large organization, even a small organization, and the egos and um, there may be expertise, but I've worked with expertise, brilliant people who cannot articulate in English very well. And so they're very hard to understand. And the fact is that most of the most of the analyst firms are US based. And so you have to be able to articulate. People don't like to hear that. So you ruffle some feathers, you have to have thick skin, you have to be very mature and and anyway, it's a great job, but it also takes a mindset of resilience, and it takes a mindset of, who do I want to be in this role, and to be that person and step into it and get training. That's another thing. I wish there was more training on it. How can we empower analyst relations professionals to really
Well, just to underscore that, I think you hit on it earlier. We collectively hit on it. AR is a lot of different jobs in and of itself. It is filling out questionnaires. It is executive presence. It is technical expertise. And maybe the AR team of the future will have individual roles for each of those things. So it's not somebody, I wear 12 hats, I wear 6 hats, and another person wears 6 hats. Who knows if that's the case?
That's
But
another
yeah, I
question
agree
I
with you.
have. Like, how
Yeah.
many people does an AR function actually need?
More than it has today.
Maybe not. I mean, it depends on what the executive team and the staff, how large the organization is, how really, and a lot of people base it on Magic Quadrant responses, or how many Magic Quadrants they're in,
Yeah.
or how large the company is. I see a lot of, well, all I'll say is it depends on how strategic that role is and what value, because you're going to be laid off if you don't have a good set of analysts to bring value to the company. If you're just working towards those Magic Quadrants, a product manager can do that, or somebody in PR can work across the organization to pull in executive comms or whatever to fill out some revenue numbers, some numbers of employees, you pull in partnerships to pull in the partner strategy section. But I think if you're really talking about AR that empowers sales, go to market, is in influencing the strategy of the company, is a voice of, hey, reason within the organization. I think that's a different depth of analyst relations and market intelligence too, that requires more people because it's harder.
So, perfect segue. The question we always like to end on is, where do you think the profession's going? Whether it be 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 5 years from now? Because I agree with you. It's a lot of things. It's market intelligence, competitive intelligence. So wrap it all up for us. What's your thought
Or aspiration.
or aspiration?
Well, I think I would like to see analyst relations reporting to a CMO and to be consistently viewed as a player, on a level that is more strategic. Now that has to be, you have to hire the right person, and the company has to be ready for it.
Yeah.
And if that's a fractional leader, that's fine. I'd like to see way more training on AR. I'd like it to be, maybe there are trainers that specialize in certain types of companies, like a Google versus a startup. There are different types of companies that need different types of professionals within it. And I guess I would like to see a little bit more um, regulation within the analyst community of like this is when we're going to have this cycle of surveys. This is when this is the minimum requirement for an analyst. I don't know. I just think there has to be some quality assurance in some of these larger firms. And I have a lot of respect for a lot of analysts. So I'm talking about um, some, probably the exceptions. But I think ultimately to have a healthy industry, we need healthy analysts. We need really smart people that can add that value back to the organization. And I put that on the firms as well.
I
Uh,
love that.
so
I love that is truly aspirational. I love the idea of the chief research officer from IDC, Gartner, Forrester getting together and saying, "We're going to do this report, during Q1. You guys do yours during Q2." To be fair, I would just love to see Gartner do that. But no, I love that.
I don't know, maybe, and truly my whole purpose in being here and also for what I do in consulting is to help AR professionals because it is a hard role. It is very difficult um and you have to have um like I said, street smarts, like you have to be tough, you have to but you also have to be very uh, patient and listen to lots of opinions.
Yeah.
Bring those opinions together to the organization and say, well, I think we actually need to listen to this person. He knows what he's talking about, or she knows what she's talking about. She has a lot of influence, and this is what she's hearing or he's hearing. So,
Well said.
I'm going to do Nathan's job for us and bring us home. So you've been watching another episode of AR Chat. Please click subscribe, share with a friend, and do all those things to power the algorithms. You get to join us here every episode where we talk to some of the best and the brightest in analyst relations, whether that's people powering the ecosystem, people who are former analysts, current analysts, and people driving and advancing AR. So please check us out and follow us for future episodes. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.